Alright, I feel like pretty much everyone here is familiar with the concept of Alice in Wonderland. I'm not. Young girl goes on a drug trip. Got it. It follows a young girl named Alice who is bored in the real world. So she falls asleep and ends up in a place called Wonderland, where she meets a whole bunch of weird and interesting characters before waking up back home again. Originally written as a book by Lewis Carroll in 1865, there has since been countless TV and film adaptations, going way back from 1903 all the way up to 2022, with future projects still in the works. Out of all these takes on the property, I'd say the most iconic one for most would be the 1951 Disney film, and then arguably the 2010 and 2016 Tim Burton films. But one particular take that often gets overlooked, and perhaps for good reason, is the Paramount live-action film from 1933. And yes, this film was actually intended for young audiences. Now, although Alice in Wonderland is often compared to a drug trip, with its wacky characters, crazy concepts, and the consumption of suspicious substances, the majority of the film still managed to make it kid-friendly, with the use of bright colours, or making the zany characters possess a more cuter cartoony design. 1933 Alice in Wonderland clearly didn't get this memo, as all of its characters looked like something that was spawned out of a creepypasta. So whereas something like 1951 Alice in Wonderland could be compared to a drug trip from a little bit of weed, 1933 Alice in Wonderland would be a psychedelic nightmare on acid. Oh, and can you guess the rating for this film? That's right, it's our good old friend, the classic U rating.
And there will be nothing unsuitable for children.
And I know what you're thinking.
But Steve, it was the 1930s. Kids thrived off creepy shit like this.
Well, apparently even this film proved too much for the 30s children, as due to its frightening nature, parents refused to take their kids to see it, and thus it ended up becoming a bit of a box office bomb. And even since then, the film has received very little recognition since its initial release, and I only heard about it because I randomly saw it mentioned in a few comments. So yeah, cheers for that guys. But let's take a look at this mostly forgotten Fright Fest as we tumble down the rabbit hole and take a look at Alice in Wonderland, 1933. The film starts off with an incredibly long opening credits sequence. No, seriously, this goes on for just over 3 minutes. It's not like they could have just had the actor's name with their character written on screen. Oh no, we've got to show the character and the actor playing it on 2 separate pages. I think part of the reason for this was that Paramount was going bankrupt at the time and so wanted a star-heavy film in hopes that it could save the studio. Hence why there is so much emphasis on the cast at the beginning. The irony being that despite having a lot of big names for the film, most of them are in full costume, so you can't even see them on screen. We eventually begin the film with Alice, who is sat bored at home with her babysitter.
Hello, Sir Turtle.
Bitch. But it seems moderate animal abuse isn't the only heinous thing Alice has done.
There is another egg for you to eat.
Oh, I did eat both eggs, but I put one of them all back together again.
Alice!
Yeah, kids these days putting their eggs back together. No wonder we got a Second World War. Also, I love in this scene how this cat is seemingly screaming whilst Alice rambles on about nothing.
Holds up another cat just like you. Oh, Dinah, wouldn't you like to see what the looking-glass house is like?
Put me down, you psychotic egg repairer! Go back to abusing the turtle!
Alice then falls asleep and the babysitter leaves the room. Alice then wakes up and peers through the large mirror in the living room, imagining a parallel world on the other side of it. She then presses against the mirror and miraculously enters through to the other side, where not only everything is backwards, but books can now change their volumes and Alice can now speak without moving her lips.
Well, I knew this part of the room would be different.
And it's not just Alice possessing this power, it seems, as she stumbles across some chess pieces who are also seeming to have trouble syncing up their lip movements.
I assure you, my dear, I shall never forget the horror of this moment.
And yes, if you're wondering if I'll be pointing out minor technical mishaps and inconsistencies throughout the film, of course I'm going to, 'cause I'm a prick. Alice then floats out of the house, where she spots a white rabbit, and so chases it down a hole. What I find interesting about this film is that it combines elements from both books, as Alice goes through the looking glass and down the rabbit hole before getting into Wonderland. In the first book, Alice is sat in the real world, and things only get strange once she falls down the rabbit hole. And it's in the sequel book, Through the Looking Glass, that she re-enters Wonderland through the mirror. And it's not only this moment, as there are various scenes in the film that are actually from the sequel book. Alice falls down the rabbit hole, and seems remarkably calm about potentially falling to her death. In fact, Alice seems remarkably chill about every strange thing that goes on in this film. I don't know if that's because she's aware this whole thing is just one big fever dream, or if the turtle prodding, egg repairing, cat tormenting girl really is an emotionless psychopath. Alice eventually lands and begins looking around, where she finds a small door that she unfortunately can't fit through. But then a bottle magically appears on the table, instructing Alice to drink it. Not poison. Oh well, that's a relief. Better drink away then. Man, imagine if that logic applied in all situations. Oh, no thanks. I don't accept random drinks from strangers.
Oh, 1 sec.
Oh wow, awesome. Thank you so much. Alice drinks the inconspicuous bottle and finds that it magically turns her big. Gutted that she won't ever be able to get through the door now, Alice begins to sob, creating a pool of tears below her. Fortunately, however, another random item appears, this time a food item, instructing Alice to eat it. Oh Alice, it didn't specify whether it was poison or not. The food item causes Alice to shrink down, so she can now fit through the door. Unfortunately, however, she now can't reach the key, and as she runs towards it, she falls into her pool of tears, which has now developed into a mass ocean apparently, during which she comes across a random mouse who she tries to befriend.
Perhaps you don't understand English. I dare say you're a Frenchman.
I hate you.
Yeah, well, that's what happens when you accuse someone of being French. Alice then comes across this freaky ass dodo bird, who looks more like a diseased vulture than anything else. Even more creepy when you consider that this is a full-size human costume, meaning in reality, this abomination stood around 2 meters tall. The dodo begins to talk about history, which magically causes Alice to dry out. Yeah, that's pretty much my effect on women whenever I try to talk to them about animation. And so that's why the later seasons of Dexter's Laboratory are considered a failure amongst the series. Now, let's talk about the various iterations of the Powerpuff Girls.
Shall I put you to sleep now?
Jesus, that escalated quickly. Alice then comes across a smoking caterpillar, who appears to have hairs coming out of his eyes for some reason. Oh, no, my bad. His actual human face is further down.
3 inches is such a horrid height to be.
I am 3 inches high. It's a very good height to be.
Yeah, you tell her, buddy. Nothing wrong with 3 inches. The caterpillar tells Alice that one side of the mushroom will make her bigger, and the other will make her smaller. Alice takes a bite of the bigger side, but unfortunately grows a little too much. Shit, she was right. 3 inches is nothing. And he clearly got so scared that he somehow managed to glitch out completely. Alice then shrinks herself back down and comes across a house with a frog, and a fish with a Porky Pig speech impediment.
My compliments to the Hutches.
That's all, folks.
Oh, and fun fact, the guy who plays this frog, Sterling Holloway, would later go on to voice the Cheshire Cat in the 1951 Disney film.
My compliments to the Queen.
Most everyone's mad here.
The frog is then hit with a plate from inside the house, to which Alice gives zero fucks about. Alice then enters the house to find a bunch of chaos going on. And holy shit, is that an actual baby they're tossing around like that? Like, I know this is the 1930s where punting your kid across the room was the norm, but Jesus Christ. Now for my sanity, I did have to research this. According to Amazon, the baby is played by actor Billy Barty. Barty was actually born in 1924, so would have been 9 years old at the time of filming. But because Barty had dwarfism, he would appear much younger than he actually was. In fact, he also plays the young chess piece near the beginning of the film. So, there you go. You can't throw an actual baby around, but apparently 9-year-old dwarfs are perfectly fine.
Speak roughly to your little boy and beat him when he seizes.
What?
Alice is given the child, which turns into a pig and runs away. Unfazed that she just let an infant run free, Alice then meets the Cheshire Cat.
Why do you grin, old cat?
Because I'm on a shit ton of cocaine, child. The Cheshire Cat tells Alice that she should find the Queen to play some croquet before vanishing in a horror-like manner. I really shouldn't have eaten all that mushroom. A house then appears in front of Alice, because why not? To which she joins the Mad Hatter, the March Hare, and the Dormouse for a tea party. Weirdly enough, despite being called the Mad Hatter, he's actually one of the more sane and normal people in this nightmarish landscape. Which still isn't saying that much, to be fair. Clearly unsatisfied with the lack of nightmare fuel, Alice leaves the tea party and stumbles across the Queen. I love the confused and then joyful moment we get from this child. For a film filled with such horrifying imagery, this is actually a really wholesome moment. Alice is then invited by the Queen to play some croquet. And I know I questioned this film's ethics when it came to the use of an actual baby, but here they are using actual animals. I thought for a while that this flamingo was dead or fake, but then it suddenly starts coming to life halfway through the scene. Oh boy, this is just like abusing animals back home. Alice then stumbles across this strange griffin-like creature, but if you think that's strange, just wait till you see the crying mock turtle. Holy fuck, forget the flamingo, here's an animal that's really suffering. Like seriously, what were they thinking? Not only is its overall design just so distressing, but the way the tears constantly flow from it is just so tragic.
Or shall the mock turtle sing?
Oh, a song, please.
Oh please, for the love of God, no.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Good lord, someone end this poor creature. Also, I think the son is enjoying his suffering a little too much. Alice then stumbles across Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Ah yes, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, the two dopey yet lovable characters I remember so well. Surely the film can't mess these two up. Oh sweet merciful Christ. Man, even the tree looks disturbed by what it is witnessing. We then get an animated section about a walrus and a carpenter hunting for some oysters. Fun fact, the animated short was produced by Harmon and Ising, who would later go on to work at MGM Studios, and it was Rudolph Ising's team that would produce the first Tom and Jerry episode. And you know what? The short itself is actually pretty charming. Look at all the cute little baby oysters. Makes a refreshing change from all the horrors we've seen so far, and oh my god, they've been eaten. All the more horrific in that the carpenter and the walrus were to the point of crying because they felt so sorry for them.
And this was scarcely odd because they'd eaten everyone.
What the fuck? Tweedledum and Tweedledee soon flee as they notice a giant black crow approaching them. The crow then turns into the White Queen, I think, who comes gliding in, strings and all. She then randomly morphs into a sheep, yep, just go with it, who sells Alice an egg, which that egg then turns into arguably the creepiest thing in this entire film. Humpty Dumpty. I think it's the combination of his face looking half burnt, along with the giant mouth that has very little movement to it. Plus the fact that in some shots, you can actually see the actor's real mouth inside, making it look like something from an alien film rather than a fairy tale.
Tell the king! Tell him to bring his horses and his men! Help!
Oh, thank goodness. Alice then meets the White Knight, which, to be honest, not really too much to say about this scene, other than he just seems really drunk off his face. So drunk, in fact, that he sometimes forgets to move his mouth when talking.
My mind goes on working all the same. In fact, I once invented a new pudding during the meat course.
Alice then tumbles down a hill, maybe she got secondhand drunk from the night, and finds a crown with her name on it, where she then gets lessons on how to be a queen from the White and the Red Queen from earlier. Again, not too much to say about this scene, other than the funny moment the camera gets knocked while zooming in. But then this all leads to the grand acid-tripping finale, as Alice attends a dinner party in her honour, where all the other horrifying characters are present, along with some new ones too, such as this satanic-looking meatloaf, which probably inspired a generation of vegetarians, and a pudding which Alice cuts a piece off.
How would you like it if I were to cut a slice out of you, you creature?
And then, I'll be real, I don't even know how to describe this scene.
Here I
Alice then wakes up back in her living room, pondering about whether the whole experience actually happened. And to be honest, I can't blame her for wanting to mentally block it out, where the film ends and the credits roll. So yeah, that was Alice in Wonderland 1933. How was it overall? A bit meh, to be honest. The film didn't do too well at the box office, and critics weren't too kind to it either. And yeah, I can see why. Despite the novelty of having most of the characters looking like pure nightmare fuel, outside of that there really isn't much else on offer. For a film that only has a runtime of 77 minutes, it still feels like it drags, which is astonishing as originally the film was going to be 90 minutes long. We're just hopping from scene to scene with no real narrative or connection, and in each of those scenes, we're mostly presented with our characters standing still just exchanging dialogue. I think this is part of the live action format having severe limitations of what could be done on screen at the time. But then again, Wizard of Oz did a similar thing in 1939, and that really worked. Do I recommend checking this out? I mean, I guess if you're really curious just for the novelty of it, but otherwise, there's really not much reason to see it. It may have been a bit of a fever dream in places, but this is one film I don't intend on looking into again anytime soon.